was 28 when my world fell apart. My name is Emily, and I'm telling you this story because I want you to know what it's like to lose everything, and then find a way to keep going. It's not easy to talk about, but I hope my words reach someone out there who feels as broken as I did. 5 years ago, I was married to the love of my life, Daniel. We met in college, at a small cafe near campus. I was studying English, dreaming of becoming a writer, and he was an engineering major with a laugh that could light up a room. He spilled coffee on my notebook that day, apologized 100 times, and offered to buy me a new one. I laughed it off, but he insisted on taking me to dinner instead. That was the start of us. We got married at 24, young and full of dreams. Daniel was my rock, steady, kind, always knowing how to make me smile when I was stressed. We lived in a tiny apartment in Boston, with creaky floors and a leaky faucet we never got around to fixing. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We'd spend evenings planning our future, kids, a house with a big backyard, maybe a dog. We were so sure time was on our side. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Daniel was driving to work when a truck ran a red light. The police said it was instant. He didn't suffer. But I did. I suffered every second after the phone call that shattered my life. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at the wall, unable to cry at first because the pain was too big. It was like my heart had been ripped out, and all I could do was sit there, numb, while the world kept moving without him. The weeks that followed were a blur. Friends and family came by, bringing casseroles and flowers, saying things like, "He's in a better place," or, "You're so strong, Emily." I wasn't strong. I was falling apart. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for Daniel, only to find his side of the bed empty. His clothes still hung in the closet, his toothbrush sat by the sink, and his favorite mug, a Goofy, one with a cartoon, dog, stayed on the kitchen counter because I couldn't bear to move it. Grief is a strange thing. It's not just sadness. It's anger, guilt, and this heavy, suffocating feeling that you'll never be whole again. I was angry at the truck driver, at the world, at Daniel for leaving me. I felt guilty for every fight we'd ever had. Every moment I could have been kinder. I stopped writing, stopped going out, stopped answering my phone. My sister Claire would come by and force me to eat, but I was just going through the motions. I didn't know how to live in a world without him. One day, about 6 months after the accident, I found a letter tucked inside one of Daniel's old books. It was a note he'd written to me on our first anniversary, one I'd never seen before. "Emily," it said, "you're my home. No matter what happens, I'll always find my way back to you. Keep shining, my love." I broke down, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. That letter felt like a message from him, a reminder that he'd want me to keep going. But how? How do you move forward when the person you built your life around is gone? I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Harper, a kind woman with a soft voice who never pushed too hard. She told me grief doesn't have a timeline. "You don't get over it," she said. "You learn to carry it." I hated that idea at first. I didn't want to carry this pain forever. But she was right. Slowly, I started finding small ways to cope. I'd go for walks in the park where Daniel and I used to run. I'd write in a journal, pouring out my thoughts to him like he was still listening. It didn't make the pain go away, but it made it a little easier to bear. 1 year after the accident, I decided to move. Staying in that apartment, surrounded by memories, was too much. I packed up and moved to a small coastal town in Maine, a place Daniel and I had talked about visiting someday. It was quiet, with salty air and crashing waves that felt like they could wash away some of my sorrow. I rented a little cottage by the sea, got a job at a local bookstore, and tried to rebuild. But every step felt like a betrayal. How could I live when he couldn't? I didn't know it then, but that move was the first step towards something new. Not happiness, not yet, but a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to carry the weight of my grief and still find a way to live. The bookstore was my safe haven. It was a cozy place called the Rusty Page. with wooden shelves packed with books, a coffee nook, and a cat named Poe who slept on the counter. My boss, Margaret, was a warm, no-nonsense woman in her 60s who seemed to know everyone in town. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, which I appreciated. I think she could tell I was running from something. Working at the bookstore gave me a routine. I'd shelve books, help customers, and sip coffee while Poe purred beside me. It was simple, but it kept me grounded. The townspeople were kind, if a bit curious about the new girl from Boston. I kept to myself at first, afraid to let anyone in. Every smile, every kind word, felt like it was meant for someone else, someone who wasn't carrying a hole in her heart. One regular customer started to change that. His name was Lucas, a carpenter who came in every Saturday to browse the history section. He was tall, with calloused hands and a quiet way about him that made me feel at ease. He'd ask for recommendations, and I'd suggest books about World War II or the American Revolution, which he seemed to love. Our conversations were short but comfortable, like we'd known each other longer than we had. One day he brought me a coffee. "You always look like you could use one," he said with a shy smile. I laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. It was the first time I'd laughed in months. We started talking more, about books at first, then about life. He told me he'd grown up in this town, left for a few years to work in the city, then came back because he missed the ocean. I told him bits and pieces about myself, careful not to mention Daniel. It wasn't that I didn't want to. I just wasn't ready. But Lucas had a way of making me feel seen. He'd notice when I was having a rough day and bring me a pastry from the bakery down the street. He'd tell silly stories about his dog, Max, who once stole an entire loaf of bread from his kitchen counter. Little by little, I started to look forward to his visits. It scared me, how much I liked talking to him. Every time I felt a spark of warmth, guilt would creep in. Was I betraying Daniel by letting someone else make me smile? One evening, after closing the bookstore, Lucas asked if I wanted to walk along the beach with him and Max. I hesitated. The beach was where I went to feel close to Daniel, where I'd sit and talk to him in my head. But something in Lucas's eyes, kind, patient, not pushing, made me say yes. We walked along the shore, Max chasing seagulls, the waves crashing softly. Lucas didn't fill the silence with chatter. He just walked beside me, letting the ocean do the talking. Finally, he said, "You seem like you've got a lot on your mind. Emily, if you ever want to talk, I'm here." His words were simple, but they hit me hard. I realized I'd been holding my breath for so long, afraid to let anyone in. That night, I didn't tell him about Daniel, but I felt a wall inside me start to crack. Over the next few months, Lucas became a friend. We'd grab coffee, go for walks, or sit at the bookstore after hours, talking about everything and nothing. He never pushed me to open up, but he made it safe to try. One day, I told him about Daniel. Not everything, but enough. I told him about the accident, the letter, the move to Maine. He listened, really listened, and when I finished, he just said, "I'm so sorry. Emily, that's a lot to carry. No platitudes, no trying to fix it, just understanding." I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years, the possibility of joy. But with it came fear. Could I let myself care about someone new without losing Daniel? Was it even possible to love again after a loss so big? I didn't have answers, but for the first time I wanted to find out. Just when I thought I was finding my footing, life threw me another curveball. It was a cold February morning when I got a call from Claire. Our mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer. It was early, treatable, but the news hit me like a tidal wave. I'd already lost Daniel. The thought of losing Mom too was more than I could bear. I took a leave from the bookstore and went back to Boston to be with her. Seeing Mom in a hospital gown, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, broke something in me. She was the one who'd held me together after Daniel died, and now she needed me to be strong for her. But I wasn't sure I could. I spent weeks at the hospital, holding her hand through chemo, reading to her from her favorite novels. trying to keep her spirits up. Claire was there too, but she had her own family to take care of, a husband and 2 kids, so I took on most of the responsibility. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically, but it gave me a purpose. I could focus on Mom instead of the mess inside my heart. Lucas kept in touch, texting me little messages to check in. "Thinking of you," he'd write, or he'd send a picture of Max sleeping on his couch. Those messages were a lifeline, reminding me there was still a world outside the hospital. But I pushed him away, not on purpose, but because I didn't have the energy to let anyone in. I was too scared of losing someone else. One night, after a long day at the hospital, I went back to my old apartment. Claire had kept it for me, saying I might need a place to come back to. Walking in was like stepping into a time capsule. Daniel's books were still on the shelves. His jacket hung by the door. I sat on the floor and cried, harder than I had in years. I missed him so much it physically hurt, and I was angry at myself for starting to care about Lucas, angry at the world for taking so much from me. I called Dr. Harper the next day, desperate for help. She listened as I poured out my fears, that I was betraying Daniel, that I didn't deserve to be happy, that I couldn't survive another loss. She told me something I'll never forget. Love isn't a finite resource. Emily, loving someone new doesn't mean you love Daniel less. It means your heart is big enough to hold both. Her words stayed with me, but they didn't erase the guilt. When I finally went back to Maine, things with Lucas were different. He was still kind, still patient, but I could tell I'd hurt him by pulling away. I wanted to explain, to tell him it wasn't about him, but I didn't know how. Instead, I threw myself into work at the bookstore, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One Saturday, Lucas didn't show up at the bookstore. I waited all day, my stomach in knots, but he never came. The next week, same thing. I finally asked Margaret if she'd seen him, and she hesitated before saying, "He's been spending time with someone else." Emily, a woman named Sarah. My heart sank. I'd pushed him away, and now he was moving on. Jealousy hit me like a punch. I hadn't realized how much I cared about Lucas until the thought of losing him became real. But I couldn't blame him. I'd kept him at arm's length, too scared to let him in. I spent nights replaying every moment we'd shared, wondering if I'd ruined my chance at something good. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep running from my feelings, not if I wanted a chance at happiness. So one evening, I drove to Lucas's house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When he opened the door, he looked surprised but not angry. Max bounded over, tail wagging, and I managed a small smile. "Can we talk?" I asked. He nodded and invited me in. His house was warm, cluttered with woodworking tools and books. A half-finished chair in the corner. It felt like him, steady, real. We sat on his couch and I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," I started. "I've been pushing you away and it's not because of you. It's because I'm scared." I told him everything about Daniel, the accident, the guilt, the fear of losing someone again. I told him about Mom's cancer, how it made me feel like the ground was crumbling beneath me. And I told him how much he meant to me, how his kindness had brought light back into my life. Lucas listened, his eyes soft but serious. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Emily, I care about you. I have for a long time. But I need to know you're ready to let me in. I can't be the one always reaching." His words stung, but they were fair. I'd been so caught up in my fear that I hadn't seen how much I was hurting him. He told me about Sarah, the woman Margaret mentioned. She was a friend from high school, recently divorced, who'd been leaning on him for support. "There's nothing romantic," he said. But I won't lie. It felt good to have someone who wasn't afraid to be close. That hurt, but it also woke me up. I realized I had a choice. Keep hiding behind my grief or take a chance on something new. I went home that night and wrote in my journal, not to Daniel this time, but to myself. I wrote about what I wanted, not just to survive, but to live. To laugh, to love, to feel again. I wrote about Lucas, how he made me feel safe and seen. And I wrote about Daniel, promising him I'd never forget him, but that I was ready to let my heart grow. The next day I called Lucas and asked him to meet me at the beach. It was the same place we'd walked months ago, where I'd first felt that crack in my walls. When he arrived, I didn't hold back. "I'm scared," I said, "but I want to try. I want to see where this goes with you." He smiled, that shy smile I'd come to love, and took my hand. "We'll go slow," he said. No pressure. Over the next few months, we did just that. We went on dates, simple things like picnics, movie nights, or walks with Max. I started opening up more, sharing stories about Daniel, about my dreams of writing again. Lucas shared his own stories, about losing his dad when he was a teenager, about how he'd learned to keep going. We were two people carrying our own scars, finding comfort in each other. Mom's treatment was going well too. She finished chemo and was in remission, though we all knew the fear of cancer coming back would linger. I visited her often and she noticed the change in me. "You're smiling again," she said one day, squeezing my hand. Daniel would be happy to see that. 2 years after moving to Maine, I was in a place I never thought I'd be. Lucas and I were together, not just dating, but building something real. It wasn't perfect. There were days when grief would hit me out of nowhere, or when I'd pull back, scared of how much I cared. But Lucas was patient, and I was learning to be brave. I started writing again, too. At first, it was just journal entries, but then I started working on a novel. It was about a woman finding her way after loss, pouring my heart onto the page. Lucas read every chapter, offering feedback and encouragement. "You're going to be a bestseller," he'd say, half joking, but his belief in me made me want to keep going. One day we went back to the beach, the place that had become ours. It was sunset, the sky painted orange and pink. Lucas took my hand and said, "I love you, Emily." It was the first time he'd said it, and my heart raced. I hadn't said those words to anyone since Daniel, and they felt heavy, sacred. But looking into his eyes, I knew they were true for me too. "I love you," I said, and it felt like a weight lifting. That moment wasn't the end of my grief. I don't think grief ever ends. It's a part of me, like a scar that fades but never disappears. I still think of Daniel every day, still talk to him in my head sometimes. But loving Lucas didn't mean I loved Daniel less. It meant my heart had room for both, just like Dr. Harper said. Last month I published my novel. It's called After the Waves, and it's dedicated to Daniel and Lucas, my past and my present. The bookstore hosted a signing event, and the whole town showed up, including Mom and Claire. Lucas stood in the back, grinning like a proud kid. I felt like I was living a life I never thought I'd have again. As I sit here now, writing this story for you, I'm in my cottage by the sea. Lucas is in the kitchen, making us dinner, and Max is snoring on the rug. It's not the life I planned with Daniel, but it's a life I'm grateful for. It's messy, imperfect, and full of love. If you're watching this and you've lost someone you love, I want you to know you're not alone. Grief is heavy, and it's okay to feel like you'll never be okay again. But you are stronger than you think. You don't have to get over your loss. You just have to find a way to carry it. Let yourself feel the pain, but don't be afraid to let in the joy too. Love isn't a betrayal. It's a gift. Your heart is big enough to hold everyone you've ever loved. And maybe, just maybe, someone new. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about life, love, and finding hope in the hard moments. Leave a comment below. Tell me your story, or just let me know you're here. We're in this together,